Hello and welcome to the Straz Center's Arts and Mind Village Chat. I'm Fred Johnson, Artistic Director at the Straz Center for the Performing Arts and also Artist in Residence, and happy to be the host of this wonderful Village Chat that we have, really exploring the importance of artistic expression as a catalyst, as a pathway to health and healing. And it is a shared conversation between the arts community and the research and science community. The Straz Center is honored to have as a collaborator the Johns Hopkins University, the Institute for the Art and Mind, which is led by Susan Magsamen. And I'm so honored to be able to be a part of these conversations. Susan, thank you so much. You have been a great foundation of our understanding as an arts institution of how to begin this conversation. So Susan, again, welcome to the village. And we are honored today because our conversation this week, and this is the third in our series, is about theater. And we are honored to have some professional folk here whose lives have been touched by and who are real experts in the world of art and theater and healing. We will start out by welcoming to the village Paige Dickinson. Paige, welcome to the village.
So I'm Paige Dickinson. I am a professor at Eckerd College in the Creative Arts Collegium. I am a registered drama therapist and board certified trainer, as well as a clinical health psychologist. And so that's really where my two passions have come for arts and medicine programming. I designed the original program at All Children's in San Diego for their arts and healing program, and have continued my work in drama therapy and hoping to bring healing through the theater arts.
Fantastic. Thank you for being here. Matthew Belakovich, welcome to the village.
Thank you. Yes, I'm Matthew Belakovich, and currently I'm the artistic director of the theater department at the Patel Conservatory, but have worked in children's and youth theater since graduating from college, and then recently have been working in the advocacy field for autism spectrum, receiving graduate level training for advocacy with ASD, and helping to form partnerships especially with Pepin Academy, and develop a Broadway Buddies program at the Straz Center so that we are learning social cues through theater, experiencing theater together. And that's really become a major passion in addition to directing and teaching young people and giving them the gift of theater.
Fantastic. And just for those of you who are just beginning to kind of learn about the Straz Center story, the Patel Conservatory is actually the educational institutional wing of the David A. Straz Center for the Performing Arts. Matt, we're so happy to have you with us. John Parks, who is a founding member of the Arts and Health team in association with the Straz Center. John, welcome to the village.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I am currently a professor at the University of South Florida, a product of New York City. Juilliard, attended Juilliard in the High School of Performing Arts. I have been involved primarily in dance and in choreography, and those endeavors have led me towards theater in terms of directing and choreographing for straight plays as well as musicals, and actually working with different theater groups in coordination with dance and movement. I have performed throughout the United States and worked in modern dance companies and ballet companies and jazz companies and theater companies for the last, I would say, maybe 55 years.
And so I would love for us to start out this village chat with Susan giving us an overview and an understanding of the beginnings of what we can begin to know about theater and its components for healing.
Great. Well, thank you, Fred. And it's really great to be on this session of the Arts and Mind Village. So, you know, In preparing for this conversation, I really thought a lot about what do we mean by theater? You know, what is this theater? And went back and really looked at ancient Greece drama and really thinking very deeply about 600 BC is when we really began to see the Greek theater emerge. And it was really uh, around that same time where this idea around spoken word for tragedy and comedy and satire really was born. I think prior to that, there was certainly theater acting out within communities, but the institutionalization of theater was really born in Greece. And this idea of face really struck me, the face of comedy, the face of tragedy. And, we know a lot about facial recognition in science. And so one of the things I thought would be interesting to talk about today is this idea of face and how we express ourselves in our face, but also how we express emotion through our body and how that gets communicated as the actor, but also how that gets communicated to the audience. So I was hoping that we might talk a bit about this idea of feelings and emotions, and also about affect in general, like how are those things communicated through spoken word. When we talk about the word play, it's so interesting because the act of playing turns out to be very important in early childhood development and cognitive development. And, this ability to be able to express and explore and experiment without risk or with low risk also relates very deeply to what happens in theater. So we can see something act out in front of us. We can feel it. It can totally change us. We can learn by it, but it hasn't had a risk that we've had to experience that because we've seen it in the other. And then just to level set, frame one more piece, I think this idea of audience is such an interesting concept. If you think about what an audience really is, it's many people coming together in one place. And there is cultural therapy in just coming together. And I think we're seeing that right now when we are seeing protesters come together in peaceful messaging. There's therapy in that. There's therapy and unity. There's a sense of belonging. There's a civic dialogue that's happening within the audience. So these are some of the things that I've been thinking about. And Paige, I'd love to have some thoughts from you about, as a therapist and also a psychologist, how you think about theater as a modality for looking at well-being at large across the general public, and then also how you think about it for specific populations.
Well, I think that theater in of itself, which is a little bit different than some of the other art forms, although I think it's in unison a lot with dance movement therapy, is the embodiment of it, the ability to bring in emotion, the ability to have a container for that emotional experience that you're working with a client using theater as a therapeutic modality. And I think that one of the things that you mentioned is this risk component. And I think what theater does is it allows not just the risk, but it allows the container to hold the risk. And especially, in light of current events, having a container to be able to hold those difficult conversations, to provide a space that brings in some safety, along with allowing you to be in that risk, I think is where the inherent therapeutic component is found within theater. But I also think the other thing you mentioned is this notion of the audience. And in drama therapy, we work very much within the witness as well, that part of the therapeutic experience is not necessarily that I am seeing you, but that you are seeing me in my state of vulnerability. So when I am in that space of play and exploring my issues through the theater modality, that you are bearing witness and that you are really truly seeing me. And so not only do I get to have the vicarious learning and the vicarious aspect of watching the other, but that it's really in the validation of the other seeing me in that space that can be very healing.
And that's different than empathy, and that's different than perspective taking. It's really about identity and acknowledging the other, right? And knowing that you have an identity from another person's point of view, that you have been seen. I think that's really, really amazing. Matthew, in your work at the Straz and the training that you're doing, how do you talk about these issues with children? Do you have a curriculum that really looks at how you help children in particular think about how they take on a character and what that means and how you embody a different way of thinking?
Yeah, well, I think there's a lot to unwrap in that kind of very small question, which is, you know, when I'm at, let's say, my Broadway Buddies class, that's a 2-part class where we're working at Pepin, and then, which is a blended environment, and then we're bringing some students back to the conservatory, and we're talking about what it looks like to have accessible theater and accessible art. And so at Pepin, what we're really doing is just trying to get that sense of play back. Or for some kids, they may not be able to access that sense of play right away in their early development years. And so we're trying to, through theater games and theater activities and improv, re-engage. And that's really, actually, it's funny, when I teach adults, I do the exact same thing, because as young people, we're so free to play with trucks or with dolls or whatever. But then as people start to look at us, that's when we stop playing. And we have to recognize, like Paige was saying, that is a part of it, and that's essential to that development. But then, yes, when I come back to Patel and I'm working with my core group, there is a curriculum of, you know, I kind of break it into 2 pieces: truth and, you know, what does your character want, right? Those are the 2 things we have to talk about. And how I get what I want is going to ultimately manifest in the play. That's going to be the action that I take, and I have to live in the moment in that truth. So those are the 2 things I focus on, and that's what makes a good story. When we're engaged in a storyteller, it's because it's coming from them, it's their truth, and they're able to tell us about the action or act out that quest. So we really kind of focus on those areas. So when you're playing in the moment, you're playing to relive that truth. So I think it's a wide mix depending on who you're working with when it comes to teaching what theater is or how to be an actor.
You know, it's interesting when we think about, you mentioned improv and thinking about truth. You know, I think sometimes some of these words around the arts become so rarefied, like, oh, I'm an improv person, or I'm a classical actor. But the reality is, one of the things we've been studying in our lab is that improvisation is something we all do every day, right? Every
Absolutely.
single conversation is improv.
Yes.
And so if you're not critiquing yourself, or if you are critiquing yourself, if you're self-regulating, you are, you know, in that sort of judgment phase. So theater, when you're improving, moves you into flow, right? It moves you in the ability to be able to not self-regulate it, but to really listen carefully, because you have to take cues from the other person and then riff on them, right? And I think,
right.
Fred, that's also true in the work that you do with music. When you're in a duet, you may be rehearsed piece, but if you're improving, you have to be very present, right? You have to be attending to be able to have that movement. And I think you could take this transfer of theater and move that into other areas of your life. Do you want to talk a bit about how you do that with music?
Sure, absolutely. I mean, especially in terms of in a musical interchange where people are improvising, especially when they're improvising together, it's an interesting thing. If you're improvising solo wise, you're basing your thing on a basic premise that is a common understanding. So actually, a jazz ensemble is a perfect metaphor for life. The other thing too is that improvisation it's a selfless act. In other words, unless we've agreed to go abstract, if you're improvising, then my role is to find the space in between where you are and find a synergy that works, right? So that out of that comes a common beauty. Again, unless like an abstract painter, where we have agreed to dispel reality and go into other spaces. So absolutely, I taught at a school in Boston many years ago. It was the National Center of African American Artists, the Elma Lewis School of Fine Arts. And Elma Lewis, who was an amazing visionary and an artist and a dancer, she said that life is an improvisational act. And so, I mean, I think we're moving into, and we move there pretty quickly, but we're moving into a really interesting area. And that area is, where is the relativity of theater or act or play and real life? Paige, you talked about, I am seeing you and you are seeing me. In some of the realities that we face today in the national conversation that we're having, is that in the play of life, some of us feel like you don't see me, and I can't see me in the reality, So I mean, it's like things are so connected. Matthew, you talked about living that truth, and truth. So understanding a common truth, and then how do you act that out? How do you move from that truth? And Susan, in terms of improvisation, for some people, every day, and we do improv. We're improvising every day of our life. For some people, that concept of improvisation is survival. So I'd love to move into, especially when we talk about healing and health. Paige, how do you feel about an opportunity and a responsibility now to understand sort of the dynamic of life play, and how then does the palette of the theater, how does the palette of the stage, how does it, how do we go into the operating room? How does it become a medicinal space, for healing and for well-being? How important is the actor's understanding of the relativity of the life play?
Well, I think what I'm sitting in, and I don't know if this answers your question, but I do think it is at the heart where theater has a role in this moment, is that all of theater in some ways is based on the improv rule, yes and. And in this moment, does that principle hold true for all? And I don't know if I can answer yes to that question, because for many of us walking in this world right now who own privilege, yes and is a possibility. That theater rule stands true for me. But I don't think that theater rule stands true for everyone. And so I think theater, if we can get back to that true essence of yes and the true essence of I am stepping in to experience the other, I think that at the heart is the healing. And I firmly believe that the theater artist is the best one to translate that to the larger world. As a theater artist, we're trained to take on the other perspective. We're trained to go and look and see in all of the intricate details the role that we're stepping into. What is that role's truth? What is that role's experience? And if we can translate that to humanity, that as I am getting to understand you, that I'm in some ways doing a character development, I'm getting to understand all of the avenues that you have walked in your experiences. I think that's at the foundation of healing. And so I think the artist, we have the tool to teach that. in community.
You
And I
know,
think it's our responsibility to do that.
yeah, and certainly open up the opportunity, because I mean, I think, you know, again, in the work that I've done kind of internationally, oftentimes going into what would be considered to be volatile situations where people are diametrically opposed to each other. The main reason why that is allowed to perpetuate itself is because they haven't given themselves the opportunity to know each other's story.
Mhm.
You know, for instance, because it becomes a matter of perspective. The yes and that you spoke about in terms of coming from an experience of privilege, and then my yes and is, yes, you're going to face challenges in your life. Yes, you're starting out with no camouflage in your life. Yes, you're living into a reality that is going to be a reality where you have to work harder, jump higher, go over barriers. And if you can do that, you'll survive. So, you know, it becomes a question of really this. So it's the actor, and it's also the script writer, you know, and it's also the director, and it's also the understanding of a common purpose. At least that's how I feel. Matthew, and then John, I'd love to hear also from you in terms of how it's been experienced for you. But Matthew, how does that apply? I mean, I know you have some experiences in your life. You know, how does that apply in terms of, I guess, maybe the role and responsibility? Because I think that's what the general public, you know, needs. And you know, some people just come to the theater because I want to be happy. I just want to come here and be happy. Heal me, make me happy. You know, so there's a component of that. But what about this practical application?
Yeah, I guess I was listening to Paige and trying to also think about why I like theater and why I like clowns so much, and where that came from my personal perspective growing up. And I think the other piece of theater is you see the potential for creative solutions, or you see the potential for solution, and something that during my undergrad studies, I was in this group with Milwaukee Public Theater, and it was really working with Augusta Boal's concept of theater for change and theater for the oppressed. And I actually teach a lot of that in my classroom, because what it does is it actually takes away the idea of script, and it focuses on learning a community, listening to each other, and then a lot of nonverbal work. Because if you're in a community that can't seem to talk to each other, when you strip that away, sometimes the conversation is stronger, sometimes it's better. And that's that potential for creative solution that I think really comes through. And so that, I guess, as far as impact or where I see myself or what I need to be doing right now, is providing the idea for people to see potential, or facilitating that, or teaching my students how to create a space for that, so that yes, that is improvisation, but there's a goal there, and that's kind of important for me.
Yeah, phenomenal. John, I know I've had some experiences, some really powerful experiences early on when I had the opportunity to meet you, and you know how you so eloquently kind of outlined the connection between artistic creation and, you know, as a dancer, as a choreographer, but also a replication of, or a connection to life, real life and social order. What's your feeling about that as a...
Well, I feel it's very interesting, this discussion, and I'm stimulated by it. You know, for someone whose stock and trade is actually movement and communication through movement, theater, you know, you mentioned about jazz and trying to find that space in between, and certainly in terms of choreography or dance, as it relates to theater, that is where we try to find that space. And with gesture, with script, with dialogue, we try to find where that is in the character, in the performer, how we relate to what the subject matter is, or what the plot is, and how else can you see it. So for dance, sometimes Yeah, you know, Matthew talked about the truth. Sometimes we, in movement, we present other truths or other sides of the truth. Because, you know, if the truth is the pinnacle, there is to the right and to the left of that same truth. And some people at times can't understand and can't hear the truth. And so when you sometimes abstract it or show alternative ways of presenting it, there is another kind of way that they can approach it. I also remember, in terms of doing the Wiz on Broadway, there were a number of people who would come, you know, 2 and 3 times a week to watch it, because every time that they would come and watch, I mean, they knew all the songs, they had the albums, you know, they knew all the dialogue, but they would find another truth in it every single time that they would watch. And every time they would see something, and I would have an opportunity to a number of these people to have a discussion about that after the performance. And what did you see this time? And what did you see that time? And it kind of reflected the kind of reality when you see a performance that you're at another time and space every single time. Every single moment is very different. And you absorb things and hold on to things and understand things in relationship to time and space. And so I found that was very, very, very profound in terms of that truth happening in that way. The other situation is how does that reflect, how does the audience reflect and understand that? So as artists, we're not really regurgitating information and facts, but we also are trying to read the audience and getting those essences feeding back to us as a performer. We use that in ways to communicate something that maybe they had difficulty understanding or emphasizing one point or another. And you do that with vocal tonality, you do that with a different kind of gesture, but that communication and that connectedness between the performer and the audience is there. And there lies some of what we call improvisation in a very interesting way. And it's something that we don't really kind of talk about, but it is, and that camaraderie and kinsmanship really makes the healing happening, so that you are a colleague with the audience. So perform as a colleague with the audience, and there is this conversation, unverbal conversation, sometimes that's going back and forth.
I'll add to that in saying that I think there is a relationship between the actors, a relationship between the actors and the audience, and a relationship between the audience members. And so there is a community, collective consciousness that happens, and regardless of what the emotional content is, the group begins to start to feel it individually, but then they feel it collectively, and and there's change. The other interesting thing about what you said, John, is that this idea of perception. So we enter a space with our own perceptions, and that comes from genetics, it comes from life circumstances, experiences, conditioning, and so we all come to theater with a different point of view, yet there are certain universal truths, and I think your work illustrates this in terms of body movement. Like when somebody is doing this or has their head down, we see that as either praying or hope or despair. We know the biology of physicality of that without words. And sometimes words actually just get in the way, or they provide another level of detail. How we perceive it still depends on where we come from. I just wanted to mention one other thing related to this idea of civic dialogue. When Hamilton came out, people were like, yeah, this rocks. You know, I didn't understand the Constitution. I didn't understand how messy it was, how hard fought it was, how political it was, how ugly it was, how sneaky it was. You know, it was just like pulling back the covers and going, man, this is unbelievable how we got here. And now today, look at where we are. That theater piece serves as a reminder that if you want a democracy, you got to work your ass off, right? You got to fight, fight, fight. And I think there's something about the toning us, toughening us, forging us with Hamilton as an example. I mean, all these kids know every single word, and they're fight songs, you know, they're fight songs. And that has helped us as a country have a path that we might not have had that not been there. And so I don't know, I just thought of that and I thought that was worth sharing.
Can I add something about, just real quickly, riffing on what John said too? I can't remember what book it was in, so I'm not going to actually credit, but there was a concept that it's theater is like chess, and you want the audience to feel like they are playing with you. You know all of your moves as an actor, and you're free to improvise within that moment. But the audience, if we create the correct space for them in the viewing, they also too feel like they have choice, like they have the ability to move their pieces. And by doing that, like you were saying, that low risk environment, they are able to feel like they have participated in that real event that happened on stage, but at such a low risk when they leave the theater, and the ability to then have the knowledge of the chess game and play it in life. And that has stuck with me since I've read it, because I just really feel it's true.
I'll throw out something and pass it on to Paige, which is mirror neurons, right? So we actually are experiencing biochemically what people are experiencing on the stage, and you can see it. You can see what lights up in the brain, you can see what's happening in the brain, yet you're not actually having that experience. You're not the person, but you are so there. So I totally agree. And Paige, I would think that your clients also have a similar neurobiological experience.
Absolutely. And I think that's sort of where, as drama therapists, we began. When all of the mirror neuron research came out, we got very excited because that really spoke to one of the processes that's probably happening in the healing aspect. And I think that, you know, given Straz community orientation, I think there are also a lot of, there's theater programming for communities. You know, we talk about devised theater, autobiographical theater, playback theater. All theater experiences that you can be both actor or witness, depending on where your comfort level is, but you get to play with what is happening within your particular community. You can have those honest discussions in a playback theater where you're getting, as that audience member, to say, here's my story, and getting the opportunity to say, and you're getting it wrong, so can we go back and correct that? And I think that for those that aren't ready for their story to be told, but they want it to be heard, devised theater, ethnodrama, playback all gives those opportunities for my story to be told, for my story to be heard, for me to see my story being heard. And yet, if I'm not ready, I'm not, you know, I got the baby toe in, I can still have that opportunity because of that, those mirror neurons and the ability to witness the experience.
Oh man, that's so wonderful. I love the fact that there's a conversation that has both mirror neurons and Hamilton in the same space. You know, I think that that's the beauty of the possibility. I love what you said, Matt, about the possibility for creative solutions. We're running out of time, and we could probably go on for another hour or so. But what a gift to be able to take this time and to really be able to bring together this shared conversation that is a creative one and is also a scientific one, and really, gives us a format for moving forward together with a deeper understanding as we take a look at all of these wonderful disciplines. Matthew, I spent 7 years and studied classical mime. So, the very first time that I heard that, that you had been a clown, with Ringling Brothers, it prompted me, what a great beginning for a joke, a mime and a clown walk into a bar.
Yeah.
And meets a neuroscientist.
Right. Yeah, exactly. What attracted me so much to clown, I think, as a young person, was vulnerability. Was the ability to access that, not only show it, but access it in another human being. And that's ultimately, I love spectacle, don't get me wrong, but that's ultimately what led me to mask work, red nose work, clown work, all of that. Because in order to live in that world, it's all about discovery. And in order to discover, you must be vulnerable. So it's this huge thing that really attracted me to that person, that clown.
Yes, no, absolutely. And when all is said and done, I think that all of these conversations, and hopefully our ultimate goal, is just to really tap into and embrace yet again the depth of our humanity and who we can be together, and how as artists we can really be a part of recreating or retranslating the importance of artistic expression, to understand that it is absolutely a part of our health and well-being. Matthew, Paige, John, Susan, thank you for being a part of this conversation. Thank you for the work that you all do in the world and the impact that you have on the world. And our thanks to both Johns Hopkins University and the Art and Mind Lab and the Straz Center for the commitment to really have a conversation about how art heals. I'm Fred Johnson from the Straz Center. We look forward to being with you next time. Stay strong, stay safe, be well, take care.